Hi everyone, I'm Helena van Luchne and today I will introduce you to the structural characterization of in vitro transcribed messenger RNA, or in short, IVT mRNA. mRNA was discovered in 1961. About 30 years later, the first report was published demonstrating that the intramuscular injection of naked mRNA in mice led to protein translation. Since then, the interest of using mRNA as a therapeutic kept on growing. However, it took another 30 years and the pandemic before the first mRNA vaccines entered the market. Indeed, the development of mRNA-based therapeutics was mainly complicated by mRNA's unstable and immunogenic nature, as well as its limited uptake in cells. These problems were encountered by the incorporation of modified nucleotides into the mRNA, like for example pseudouridine, which makes the mRNA more stable and less or even non-immunogenic. Additionally, the encapsulation of mRNA into lipid nanoparticles, or LNPs, enhances the uptake in cells and protects the mRNA from degradation. As an interesting side note, the therapeutic potential of mRNA extends beyond vaccination and can, for example, be considered for protein replacement and cell therapy. Giving some more background, mRNA is synthesized from a DNA template using in vitro transcription. Now, having a closer look at the IVT mRNA molecule itself. mRNA is made up of 4 nucleosides linked to each other by phosphodiester bridges, which render the mRNA its polyanionic nature. Within the mRNA strand, the gene of interest can be identified and 4 other components, including a 5' cap structure, a 3' poly A tail, and 2 untranslated regions. The 5' cap structure can be incorporated during in vitro transcription, which is most efficient, but it can also be done after transcription. A poly A tail strand is typically already encoded in the DNA template, but can also be added after transcription. This new class of therapeutics also comes with new analytical challenges, as given in the figure on the right. Today we will go into detail in some of these characteristics, including the cap structure, the poly A tail, and sequence modifications. Therefore, we will use 2 chromatographic techniques: ion pairing reverse phase and hydrophilic interaction chromatography. It is important to note that the LC-MS analysis of mRNA requires prior digestion to shorter oligonucleotides. Going back to the chromatographic techniques, in short, in ion pairing reverse phase, the stationary phase is apolar, whereas the mobile phase is polar. Since mRNA is a very polar molecule, it will not be retained on the apolar stationary phase unless an ion pairing reagent is added. The ion pairing reagent, an alkyl amine, will ion pair with the oligonucleotides, ensuring its retention and separation based on their length. In HELIC, the stationary phase is polar and the mobile phase is apolar, so the oligonucleotides will show retention on the stationary phase based on their length. Besides these 2 methods, other methods exist, but these are the 2 main methods for oligonucleotide analysis that allows coupling to mass spectrometry. As mentioned before, LC-MS analysis of mRNA requires prior digestion to oligonucleotides. This will be done by treatment of the mRNA with ribonucleases, in short RNases. In our work, we will make use of 2 types of RNases. On the one hand, RNase T1 and 4 that both cut single-stranded RNA. The oligonucleotide fragments formed either contain a terminal cyclic phosphodiester or a terminal phosphate group. On the other hand, RNase H specifically hydrolyzes the phosphodiester bonds of RNA when hybridized to DNA and generates oligonucleotides with a terminal phosphate group. First, let's have a look at the analysis of the poly A tail. Therefore, we isolate poly A tail by digestion of the mRNA with ribonucleases, such as for example RNase T1 that cuts after every G unit, or RNase A that cuts after every C and U unit. The only part that is not cleaved by both RNases is the poly A tail. Using ion pairing reverse phase, this mixture is then separated based on length. On the chromatogram, you first see the elution of all these small fragments, followed by a later eluting peak, the poly A tail. Important to note is that the poly A tail peak shows a distribution, encompassing a variety of poly A tail lengths. This is the result of the enzymatic addition of a poly A tail after transcription. But also when the poly A tail is encoded in the DNA template, there is still variation in poly A tail length due to slipping of the enzyme. Here in the deconvoluted full MS spectrum on the right, we see that poly A tail of this mRNA varies between 119 and 129 nucleotides. The poly A tail is assumed to be of good quality when the poly A tail distribution is not too big and symmetric, representing only one population. Then, at the 5' end, we find the cap structure, which is made up of a methylated guanosine coupled via triphosphate bridge to the first nucleotide of the mRNA. To isolate the cap structure, we made use of a hybridization probe, or also called the cleavage probe, because it will target the cleavage. The probe is made up of RNA with in the middle some DNA. When the probe hybridizes to the mRNA, about 20 to 30 nucleotides away from the cap structure, and then RNase H is added, the mRNA is selectively cut at the RNA-DNA duplex formed by the mRNA and the DNA part of the probe. Thus in the end, two fragments are generated, one small 5' terminal fragment and a long 3' terminal fragment. Using ion pairing reverse phase, we can distinguish the capped fragment. When we zoom in on that peak, we see a second peak up front, representing another capped fragment generated by cleavage on a second digestion site. Shortly before the elution of the capped fragments, we can see the non-capped analogues, which allows us to calculate the capping efficiency. As introduced before, HELIC can be used as a safer alternative for ion pairing reverse phase, since the latter makes use of fluorinated compounds. Here on this slide, we reanalyze the sample from the previous slide by HELIC. Note that the capped fragment was not visible on a stainless steel flow path because of the interaction between the negatively charged oligonucleotides and the positively charged stainless steel surfaces, which can for example be found at the fritz at the beginning and the end of the column. For HELIC, it is crucial to make use of a metal-free flow path. Indeed, on this system, the capped fragment is again visible. The full MS spectrum is given here on the right, where you can see the 5 times and 6 times charged fragment. Due to adduct formation, sodium adducts for example, there is quite some noise on the signal. This slide illustrates once more the importance of a metal-free flow path for oligonucleotide analysis using HELIC. The peak-lined column clearly outperforms the stainless steel column. As given in the chromatogram, on a peak-lined column, the first injection of an RNA standard immediately gives the maximum peak intensity. In contrast, on a stainless steel column, the initial response is low and slowly increases. The RNA introduced on this column keeps sticking to the column. This is also known as passivation of the column. Nevertheless, even when the stainless steel column is completely passivated, the peak height and area remain substantially lower compared to these obtained on the peak-lined column. Regarding the cap analysis, the sensitivity can be improved by purifying the 5' fragment from the digestion mixture prior to LC-MS analysis. This can be done by anchoring the RNase H cleavage probe to binding moiety. After mRNA digestion, the 5' fragment can then be isolated using streptavidin-coated magnetic beads. Using HELIC coupled to MS, we obtain an MS spectrum displaying M over Z peaks for the capped fragment, the single-stranded probe, and the combination of both forming a double helix. This double helix structure is still present because HELIC is performed at 40 degrees, giving non-denaturing conditions. In contrast, before, in ion pairing reverse phase, we worked at 80 degrees, leading to denaturation. Note that in contrast to before, the capped fragment was now visible on a metal-free and also on a stainless steel flow path, which can be explained by the improved sensitivity of the method due to purification of the 5' fragment from the digestion mixture prior to the LC-MS analysis. After having discussed the poly-A tail and capping analysis, I would like to introduce you to mRNA sequencing via LC-MS, also referred to as RNA mapping. Again, sample preparation involves the digestion of the mRNA by ribonucleases, such as, for example, here RNase T1. Analysis of this mixture on LC-MS gives a complex profile. The idea is now to identify these peaks to certain sequences present in the mRNA. Let's have a look at this sequence in more detail. Here on the left you can find the sequence of luciferase mRNA or Fluke mRNA. When we do an in silico digestion of the mRNA with RNase T1, 521 oligomer fragments in total of different lengths are obtained. We can plot this and see that the RNase T1 digestion of Fluke mRNA generates mostly subsequences with a length of 2 oligonucleotides. This can be linked to the relatively high GC content of the mRNA construct. As given in the plot on the previous slide, many short fragments are present. If we, for example, would focus on the mass 996, a trimer, 2 isomers can be identified. Indeed, based on the MS-MS spectrum, we could elucidate that one peak corresponded to CEG and the other to ACG. Looking up both sequences in silico on the open reading frame of Fluke mRNA, then we can see that these two sequences occur on many spots. This is an important problem we have to deal with. If you have very short fragments, you get a lot of copies of these fragments in the mRNA. Indeed, just with these two sequences, we can already cover 4% of the sequence. In contrast, only a few copies are present in case of longer sequences. For example, for this heptamer, we obtain 3 peaks. Indeed, the mass corresponds to 3 possible oligomers in the mRNA sequence. However, these oligomers are present only on one side in the sequence, unlike the trimer we discussed before, and this is a good thing for covering your map. But how do we know which peak corresponds to which sequence site? This requires a lot of in silico work, which we typically do via our in-house developed program Messenger. How does this program work? On the one hand, we obtain MS-MS spectra throughout the experiment. On the other hand, based on the fragmentation rules and the mass obtained in full MS, we can fragment these isomers in silico, creating a barcode spectrum. Fitting these barcode spectra on the recorded spectrum for example, peak 2, we can select a best match representing a certain sequence. A similarity score is calculated and the highest score represents the best match. This is done for all the peaks in the chromatogram, giving us an overall coverage of 49% when only the unique sequences are considered, which is in line with papers published before. If the non-unique sequences are included, such as for example the trimer I discussed before, then we obtain a total coverage of 80%. One way to increase this sequence coverage is to combine the results obtained by RNase D1-mediated cleavage with results obtained by digestion with other RNases, such as, for example, RNase-4. RNase-4 has great potential for RNA mapping since it recognizes dimers. It cuts between a U and an A nucleotide and between a U and a G nucleotide. In comparison with RNase D1, RNase-4 cuts less frequent and it also generates longer fragments. An in silico digestion of LucmRNA indeed shows that RNase D1 digestion generates mostly subsequences with a length of 2 oligonucleotides, whereas RNase-4 digestion generates larger subsequences ranging from 1 to 35 nucleotides in length. When analyzing an RNase-4 digest on ion pairing reverse phase and comparing this to the RNase D1 digest, it is clear that most fragments are eluting later, which corresponds to larger fragments. Then, LC-MS analysis of the RNase-4 digest allowed us to determine the sequence coverage. When only the unique sequences are considered, a coverage of 88% is obtained. If the non-unique sequences are included, the coverage increased to 90%. When now combining the results from both the RNase D1 and the RNase-4 digest, we become a total sequence coverage of 95%, or even 97% when non-unique subsequences are considered. To conclude, we can also make use of LC-MS to screen for post-translational modifications in the mRNA, such as 8-hydroxyguanosine, which is a result product of oxidation. Now, how do we quantify this product? Therefore, we cleave the whole mRNA into single nucleotides.